Welcome to the Successful Athletes Podcast presented by TrainerRoad. And today we are going to interview another successful athlete today to make you faster, just like we've done with all the other episodes. And today we have an athlete from the UK with us, Rob Belsom. How you doing, Rob?
Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this, man. This is great to set aside some time and to look into your training to see how you've improved. So then hopefully we can help somebody else do the same thing. If you're listening to this now on whichever podcast app you're listening to, you can give it a rating. A 5-star rating would be awesome. And if we don't deserve that, just let us know what we can do to earn it. You can give us a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. And of course, you can head over to trainerroad.com to become fast like Rob. And if you want to be on this podcast, go to trainerroad.com/podcast. And you can find a spot where you go to the Successful Athletes Podcast, submit your story, and let us know how TrainerRoad has made you more successful. It doesn't have to be a big race win. It could be anything that you deem success. It could be any sort of improvement. So we'd love to have you submit for that. Rob, first things first, I want to just start off on getting a background in terms of context for you. So what's your family and professional situation like right now?
Yeah, so I'm married with a 6-year-old child, a son called Jack, and I'm a design engineer at Rolls-Royce.
That sounds interesting. What do you do there at Rolls-Royce in particular as a design engineer?
It's to do designing power systems and moving things around, basically.
Those cars have a lot of that too, like closing and opening and closing doors. And
No, it's not to do with the cars, it's the airplane side of things.
Oh, cool. Even cooler then. Fascinating. That's cool. So what sort of work is that? Does that mean that you're actually up on your feet and you're doing stuff where you're actually getting your hands dirty on this stuff? Or is it more of a desk scenario?
No, it's a desk-based job. So I have core hours, which I'm in the office between 10 and 12, and I think it's 1:30 and 3. And then outside of that, it's flexible. So it gives me a lot of flexibility to sort of plan family life and then training and stuff like that. So it's quite good from that perspective. And been working from home essentially for the past 6-7 months essentially. So that's even made that even easier really, because I can jump on the bike at lunchtime and do a workout in that sort of an hour and a half lunch and get back to work quite easily.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, so that's having some sort of flexibility in there has to be really helpful. I can see, if you're watching on YouTube, I think where you train right behind you right now. I can see the bike and the screen.
That's right. Such. Yeah. We've got quite a large lounge, but we haven't got a garage. So my wife's been quite nice to me and let me keep the bike in the corner of the lounge essentially. But it's quite handy. If you keep it in a little gear, it's not too noisy. And then I can still keep an eye on our son if I'm doing a workout and he can watch some Pokemon on TV or something. So again, it gives me that bit of flexibility to get the workouts in.
And having a 6-year-old how do you balance that aspect of it? And actually, we'll probably just get right into one of the key things I want to talk to you about, which is balance. And I guess we'll kind of go into that a little more, but is that difficult at all? Like, I know I personally feel at times, I feel like when I'm training and my son is like, hey, I just want to play with Legos right now. But then I have to train and it's hard. Like I honestly deal with guilt sometimes with that. I don't know. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think the same. You do feel some guilt sometimes because you want to do something for yourself, but then you also want to do something for them. So like I say, because I've got that flexibility with work. He's at school, so I can do a workout during lunchtime. If I start early in the morning, I can finish work at 3. So when he gets home from school, I can kind of dedicate 3 or 4 hours to spend time with him. So it's about that work-life balance, essentially, and the flexibility that my work gives me from being able to do that.
That you made a point in there about making time for yourself. And that was actually one of the things that you originally mentioned in the original contact that we had there, is that really having something to kind of push for yourself is something that you find valuable. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about what training does for you in that regard?
So when I started training, well, not even training, when I started biking, so I started in sort of 2008 and was doing biking. So I used to go out twice a week. This before my son was born, in the evenings. So it's in the UK. So in the summer, it was lovely for the 2 weeks that we'd have sunshine. We could get out on nice, dry, dusty trails and really enjoy it. And the rest of the time, it was slogging through mud and filth. You get back at night, you've got to hose your bike off, clean everything up, etc. And then around 2011, we actually moved cities, and at that point, because I had moved more into the city, I wasn't able to get out on the bike as much, and it kind of just fell by the wayside. And then my son came along in 2014, and I didn't actually get on a bike again until sort of 2017, which was when I sort of realised that I dedicated a lot of my time to being a dad, to being a husband and working, but it wasn't giving me anything for myself. So I needed something to do that was trying to grow myself outside of work, essentially. And it came about because of Jack, because I went into a shop here in the UK that sells car parts and bike parts, etc. And they had a half price sale, and they had some bike seats for children. I don't know why, but I just bought one there and then dug the bike out of the shed, put it on, and sort of went for a couple of mile ride. Almost sort of killed myself because I was so unfit from it. But sort of got home and then just really sort of started getting into it. I just find it gives me that time to relax. I say relax. When you're doing a VO2 max workout, it's not really relaxing, but that kind of place to just forget about everything else and just focus on something. So it's really good from that perspective.
Yeah. It's one way in which we can have like measured progress and goals and be able to chip away at those. And I mean, that's like, confidence is like a big thing that I think of a lot of the time, and like the way to build confidence. And to me, it's like you make a commitment and you follow through with that commitment. And once you've done that, you can be confident in yourself that you've made that step, and it makes the next step easier. And it tends to have like a kind of like a butterfly effect throughout the rest of your life, in the sense that once you put yourself up to something hard and you accomplish it and you check that box, then you're able to like do more and more. So that resonates with me, especially as a dad and everything else, because there's so many things that are out of our control and we can't influence them, whether that's professionally or otherwise, whether that's with our family, anything. So it's really nice to have something where you can just have a goal and chip away at that goal and make actual progress that you can see,
Yeah. And I think that's what you said about being able to get that confidence. So I started off going out for sort of rides. So the first time we've got a local trails here called Cannock Chase. It's like a 13-mile trail park, if you like. And I went out there, and this was just after I started riding again, and it took me 4 hours to do this course. I was stopping, 3 times on every hill, and these were short hills, maybe like 400-meter climbs. But I got around it, and then that started to build that confidence that I could still do this. And from there, I was sort of started looking at other ways that I could start doing other sort of biking, like adventures, activities, etc.
How cool.
So there's a mountain bike magazine in the UK called Single Track. And unfortunately, I think it's about 5 years ago, the deputy editor passed away from lung cancer, I think it was. And in her memory, they set up some organised rides. So they do one in January, which was in the Cotswolds. So it's like 50 miles for a one-day ride. And then there's a 100-mile loop around the Lake District, which was done through the summer months. So generally around the longest day. So I think it was like July, or planned to be July this year. And so as I started to grow that confidence, I decided that I'd give one of these a go. So I went down to the sort of what they call the Gen Ride, and it's in the Cotswolds. And that was in January 2019. And I took a CX bike, essentially, or a gravel bike. And I did 30 miles, but I wasn't really that fit, if you like. But I managed to do 30 miles. And that time of year, you haven't got much daylight anyway. So I kind of had to sort of abandon, but it gave me that confidence of just getting a route off someone, and then going out and following that route and seeing new things and new places and stuff. So that was good.
That's all. So at what point did you take it from, I like riding bikes, I want to take on these challenges, to I want to take on like a structured training plan? And I guess we'll probably then, of course, lead into where TrainerRoad figures into this. But when did structure get introduced, and what was the motivation there?
Yeah, so I brought a smart trainer. So it's a wheel-on smart trainer. And that was probably a few months before I did that first sort of gen ride. And I did like the FTP test that was just in their structured, like their package software. So it's like a 20-minute FTP test. It came out at 204 watts. And then I was commuting to work at the time. So I was doing that, and then I'd do some turbo sessions, but there was no real structure to it. And I think ultimately I was just sort of digging myself into a hole, making myself more and more tired. And that's where I thought I was maybe lacking a bit when I did that gen ride, that I thought I'd be fitter when I was, but the training I'd done hadn't really helped me. But like I ignited like this spark to go out and do some more challenges for myself. So when I got back from that one in January, I signed up for the summer one, which was a bikepacking event. So 100 miles over 2 days around the Lake Districts. I think it was like 12 or 13,000 feet of climbing.
I was going to say that had to have been a lot, because that region there is no really flat part to that region, right?
No, you're either going uphill or downhill, essentially. So
yeah,
and the downhills are a lot shorter than the uphills for some reason. So
yeah,
it's not always easy. But I still didn't really pick up structured training, so I knew I needed to do more work. So I kind of just plowed on how I had been doing it, and went out and did the big ride. So on the first day, I did 60 miles, and I think it's about 7,000 foot of climbing. We stopped overnight, so it was probably the worst night's sleep I've ever had. We took bivvy bags. I'd managed to rope 2 people in who I worked with to come and do this with me, but I think there's about 200 people in total doing this ride. Sort of ranging from people like ourselves who'd never done it before through to people who are very experienced bikepackers. We've got some really big bikepacking events in the UK. So like there's ones around the Scottish Highlands and stuff like that. They're sort of 550 miles long. So yeah, we had this awful night's sleep. It was the shortest day anyway, so I think the sun was rising at like 4 a.m. So kind of put our stuff away and started riding again. And the next day we did sort of 30 miles and about another 4,000 feet. So 10 miles short, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we kind of made that decision, I think, because we were a little bit experienced, to sort of just cut the loop off slightly on the first day, because we didn't think we'd get back to where we needed to be to have a sensible spot to camp for the night, essentially. And that ultimately came down to the fact that the fitness wasn't there, the ability to keep on pushing for that amount of hours wasn't there. So 100 miles on the road is difficult, but it's quite doable in a day. And also you can do it off-road in a day, so some people were doing this, but in the Lake District, that's quite a tough sort of route. You're not doing much more than 6-7 miles an hour if you're lucky. Just because of the terrain. Even the descents aren't that fast because they're rocky, technical descents. So you don't really make up much time. There's no flats, like you say, that you're able to sort of get any pace up and make up the time. So it's quite difficult to do that over one day. So I think some people just kept on going through the night, essentially, because they gave up with the idea of trying to get any rest. But it was a really good event. And like I say, I came back from that a bit disappointed, really. At first, it was kind of this thing, I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah.
It just hurt so much. But then after a couple of weeks, I had to go to a conference in the US, and then had to do some DIY that I'd been putting off at home. Sort of got the spark again. And I had a work trip, which is actually up to the Lake District. And so I was looking for something to listen to in the car, essentially, on the way up, and sort of stumbled across the TrainerRoad podcast. So I downloaded 4 or 5 episodes. So it's about a 3 or 4 hour journey. And just started listening to some podcast episodes, just random ones, essentially, that sort of sounded interested in what I was doing. And so I got back from that trip and sort of downloaded the software and started using it, essentially. So at that point, I did another ramp test. I'd actually raised my FTP. So it had gone from sort of 204, and I'd actually got up to 249 just through my haphazard way of doing some workouts, doing a bit of commuting, doing some general rides. And so I started using TrainerRoad. And I think I just started off with sweet spot base, low volume 1 and 2. And I used the forum basically to ask people sort of this was before Plan Builder. So I think Plan Builder came about sort of early this year, was it, or late last year?
Yeah, early this year.
So I asked on the forum, obviously a really friendly bunch. Sort of if you've got any questions, you can ask them there and you'll get an answer, normally pretty quickly. Sort of said what the target event I had in mind was. So I was looking more at the cross-country mountain biking type plans, but they don't actually suit that kind of riding that I was looking at in a way, because you basically just got to keep on going for a long time. So it sort of suited rolling road race more than it did like the cross-country plans, essentially. You're not looking to put out high power outputs. You're looking to just grind away at the pedals for a really long time and keep it at a good level of power. So it's like about having good muscular endurance.
Yeah.
And so I did sweet spot base 1. And at the end of the first 6 weeks, I had a week's holiday booked. We was back up to the Lake District for a family holiday. So I took the bike, and even in that 6 weeks, I could sort of feel the difference that when I went around trails that I'd been around before, I was getting up them quicker, feeling more comfortable, more confident. So it was making a big difference in that respect.
How cool. Do you remember your starting point when you first started out with TrainerRoad in terms of your threshold power, your FTP?
So it was about 249, but I actually changed trainers just after that holiday, actually. And so I had a wheel-on trainer, and then I got a wheel-off direct drive trainer and found out that it's actually been over-measuring by at least 10%. So I immediately sort of dropped down. So it's sort of more realistically, I was starting around 225 on my FTP. But although my FTP was at that level, I couldn't do 15 minutes at sort of sweet spot, should we say. So
that muscular
test.
Muscular endurance that you mentioned that you hadn't really developed quite yet, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's where I could see when I did the rides in the lakes, you're going up these hills and it can take like an hour to get up the hills. And if you can do 20 minutes, that's 20 minutes without stopping. But if you're stopping every 5 minutes, it takes a lot longer, and then you've got to have a rest for 2 minutes. So it's a bit like doing a sweet spot workout in TrainerRoad that, you start off with your progression, you've got your 5 minute blocks with like 3 minute rest or 2 minute rest. And then eventually you're working up to 15, 20 minute blocks with only 2 minutes rest. So it's kind of a similar, you can see what you're trying to develop with the progression of the plans, essentially.
That's an interesting point that I think probably isn't emphasized enough in terms of structured training, is the benefit of increased muscular endurance, just because of the fact that when you ride outside, there's so many variables that affect how you put out your power. And a lot of the time it feels easier to like ride harder for shorter periods of time. And like what I mean by that is a lot of the time when you ride with a newer rider, it's hard for them to ride at the consistent, sustainable pace. They'll kind of ride over it and then they'll drop below it, and they'll ride over it and they'll drop below it. And then after a while of doing that, then you're completely flat and can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But when your terrain just forces that upon you, that you have to consistently put out power for a long period of time, that's one of the many, many benefits, that increased muscular endurance that you get from just being on that trainer in 2 hours of consistent pedaling. You know what I mean? And it's of course structured with intervals and everything else, but it is an underappreciated perk, and one that I don't think a lot of people set out to fulfill or achieve necessarily with structured training. However, it's one of the most beneficial in terms of their performance on the bike, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You can really notice the difference. So before we did our sort of 100-mile ride, we went out for a sort of test ride with the kit that we'd got. So we did 60 miles around the Peak District. So it wasn't as much climbing, so it wasn't as bad a day in the saddle, if you like. So there's quite a famous descent in the Peak District, which is called Jacob's Ladder. And then to get up to it, you've got many different climbs, but you go up one side, it's not a particularly steep climb, but it's a long, consistent climb. And then it gets a little bit technical at the top. And so the first time I did that, I think it took me like 37 minutes to do the climb. Whereas now I can do it in sort of 25 minutes. And that comes from being able to continually grind the pedals and keep that spin up. And also, when you get to that technical bit, I'm not as fatigued. So you can actually pick your lines better when you're trying to choose your route through the trail. And that means that you don't stop as much as well, because you're actually able to choose your line. You don't dab. And then if every time you sort of stop, almost you lose a minute because you've got to reset, bring your pedal up, try and get going again. Sometimes you can't get going again because it's too steep or it's too loose.
Yeah.
So just being able to keep going makes a massive difference, and you really sort of cut the time on those sort of longer, steeper technical climbs.
Yeah, mountain biking is so much more enjoyable, or any technical discipline like that. It's just so much more enjoyable when you have the fitness to be able to make it through with, higher relative ease like that. It's just a huge benefit. I want to talk a little bit about the nutrition side of your training too. Well, actually, before I do that, where have you gotten with your FTP? So we know you started roughly somewhere around 225-ish. And where's your peak? And then right now, I know that you've kind of you've started your reset pattern to then start training into next year. But where did you get to? What was the FTP increase?
So I got to 284, which was about 6 weeks ago. So in 10 months, 60 watts.
Nice job.
So yeah, like I say, I've just kind of reset a little bit. So I just dropped it by, I think, down to 275 watts, just because I had a week or two off over the summer. I didn't re-ramp test after that because I didn't take off quite enough time. I thought I'd just drop it a little bit, and then I've got a plan builder in place ready for doing this ride next year. I've already sort of started training. It's got plenty of time. So I just started sweet spot base again because I'm pretty... I know those workouts. I knew that I wasn't going to be pushing myself too far just by dropping a little bit. And then I think I've got a ramp test due the week after next. So I'm hoping I'll sort of be back up in the 280s, maybe pushing 290. I'm feeling quite comfortable at the moment. So
that'd be awesome.
Good if I can reach that. Yeah.
How do you fuel your training? What sort of things do you eat on the bike? We'll take it from there. Actually, yeah.
In terms of on the trainer, so I've started trying to eat a bit more on the trainer as I go along. So I tend to have a bottle of High Five. So it's like 50 gram scoops that you put into the bottle, because I find that a little bit easier to take in. And then something, so I would probably do like an hour sweet spot workout for sort of the hour and a half over under type workouts. I might have a gel as well. I sort of maybe like the 45-minute mark, so that when I'm getting into that last sort of interval where it's really getting hard, it does seem to make a difference. You can feel it. You don't feel quite as bad during that last interval. And then other things like trying to sort of like have 3 or 4 jelly babies in between intervals as well, stuff like that. So if you're doing a ride, it's similar sort of foods to what you'd eat on the ride. So it's high sugar, quick sort of fix if you like, but it does the job. So
yeah,
but yeah, trying to eat more as I do the rides, and then also before the rides, following Nate's Insta, oat bran, trying oat bran and stuff like that. So not quite as big a bowls as Nate manages, but a decent bowl of oat bran for a ride, or porridge, or something like muesli.
For those that are wondering what Rob's talking about there, our CEO Nate, he's renowned for eating massive bowls of oatmeal and large portions and taking in as many carbs as possible so he can do more work. So you try to fit that in about 2 hours before. Some key principles that I found throughout that is, number one, make sure that you're prepared to take in the nutrition that you'll take in on race day. And the best way to do that is probably to train like you're going to do that. Number two is to eat regularly and to make sure that you're keeping up on that, and to train yourself through that. And then also number three is to not be afraid of taking in carbohydrate. It's a beneficial thing. And at that lower intensity, you have more flexibility in terms of what you can eat. You can't eat rice cakes with natural food within that, or anything else. But when the intensity goes up, it's tougher to eat that sort of stuff, right? So with your, and I kind of want to leave some of this to the forum. So afterwards, so people can get in touch with you on this, we'll have a forum post for this episode. Just search for Rob Belsom's name. You'll be able to find it. And, cause I want to leave like the equipment discussion for that part of things. So then people can check in on the forum to see like, what you run on your bike and everything else riding in the Lake District and all of that. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of wrap up on with this, Rob, is if you were to advise other people in terms of training, and because you've had, like you said, a 60-watt improvement in 10 months is awesome. That's a huge improvement. What obstacles did you encounter along the way, and how did you overcome them? If think about it from the perspective of somebody else, perhaps going through your journey or a similar journey.
So one of the things I found really useful is the notes section.
Mm.
So the first couple of times I did rides, I kind of ignored that. And then when I started repeating the same, so when you go through sweet spot base, you'll do it multiple times, probably through your TrainerRoad sort of sessions. So you'll do similar workouts or the same workouts. So making notes on your workouts is actually really useful. How you fueled it, how you felt, what the difference was, and things like that. So that would be definitely something I would say would make it easier. So if you start from the beginning of actually making those notes, it makes it easier as you progress and to see how you are progressing. And that's great for your motivation, because you can see, I did this one and I needed 2 gels to get through the last interval or something, but now I can do it and it's not a problem. So it's really motivating to see your progress, as well as just being able to understand how you've done something different on that workout.
That's a great tip. Yeah, underutilized feature of TrainerRoad right there. And if you don't use TrainerRoad and you're listening to this, it's the concept of taking ride notes and then looking at that log. Continue with other tips.
So the other thing as well is also analysing your rides or your workouts after them. And again, this is another motivational one. So if you go back in your previous rides and you can see, so I did like a 15-minute, a 3x15-minute sweet spot ride yesterday. And I did that ride back in October last year, I think it was. And my average heart rate was 10 watts lower, but my normalized power was like 40 watts higher for the same workout. And I didn't complete the last 15 minutes the first time I did it. Whereas this time I actually bumped it up by like 3%. And then I think I put another 3% on for the last minute just because I could almost, because I was feeling good. But again, that's really good for the motivation, that you can kind of see those numbers difference, because you can see these improvements in your fitness and how you are actually getting the benefits from the training. So that's a really good sort of tool for your motivation and keeping yourself going when you feel, sometimes you get on the bike, you think, do I really want to do this today? It could be really good to sort of get you going.
Yeah, one key with that too is that sometimes we feel like we're at a plateau because we haven't seen the same improvement that we once saw at one point or another. But looking back at that, and when you look at a ride that you've done, you can actually see how many times you've done that ride and click through and see the other instances of it when you use TrainerRoad. And that's like super motivating, because then you go, oh, okay, actually, even though I do feel like I'm not making the improvement that I envisioned I was going to have, well, actually last year I'm 40 watts up from last year, or whatever it may be. That's awesome to look at that and to take courage with that. That's a really good tip again.
Yeah. The other thing as well is the drills that you go through in a lot of the workouts. They're actually, sometimes you look at them and you think, how useful are they? But then start to find out they are really useful. So like individual leg drills, I used to train at 5 a.m. before sort of lockdown occurred, and I got the flexibility to do it over my lunchtime. So I'd get up at 5 and do my training. So I did skip the individual leg drills at 5 a.m. because clipping in and out of the bike and the knocking noise that it makes as you're trying to get your legs sort of synchronized, it's quite noisy in the house at that time in the morning. But when I started being able to do them, you can see the difference. And then again, riding sort of technical climbs, sometimes your pedal will clip out. And it's weird because your leg, you don't think about it, your leg will keep going on its own because you kind of got that muscle memory from doing those individual leg drills. And then it gives you the time to get the other foot clips back in without having to stop again. So it keeps that progression going up the climb, for example. So it's kind of a side benefit. I know you don't do the individual leg drills for that reason, but having that muscle memory makes a big difference. And then the cadence drills as well. So my cadence has sort of gone up from 80. So I comfortably do sort of 95 to 100 now during a workout. And again, having that range of cadence on the trails makes a massive difference, because you can quickly accelerate if you need to with your cadence, or get up a section without having to change gear. Because sometimes a gear change on a sort of steep section, you'll spin out or whatever. So being able to change that cadence rather than having to change gear is really useful. So getting that range of cadence from the different drills you'll do, like standing up at like 60, 70 RPM up to sort of 120 RPM. Having that range of cadence is really good. So yeah, follow the drills that you get in the various workouts, I would say.
I hear Chad all the time when I'm on the trainer or not, and that's our head coach, Chad Zimmerman, with the workout text that comes up. That's what we're talking about here, and they give you instructional drills. But I relax my shoulders many times on many rides because of thinking of that very line that Chad is always reminding us to do. Relax your head and shoulders, unclench your jaw. You know, it's really easy to ride with all that extra tension. So yeah, they pay huge dividends. Is there anything else that you would recommend to somebody that's going through some sort of training process or thinking of it?
Yeah, the other thing is the plus and minus versions of the workouts. So sometimes you can be a bit time crunched. So when you go on to, I mostly use the PC app, but you can click on it and I think it's got like a workout variants button. Mm-hmm. And you can normally find like say it's an hour one, but I've got a conference call I've got to be on. I can normally find like a 45-minute version of it. You're not actually losing a lot of work, because a lot of the time it's the intervals or the rest periods that are shortened. So you actually find you might only be down 2 or 3 minutes on the actual sort of sweet spot or the threshold intervals. So you still get the majority of that work done rather than just skipping the workout completely. And there's that kind of the reverse of that if you find yourself with a bit more time, then, or you're feeling really good that day, then look for a plus version. So, another 15 minutes or 30 minutes on that day. So it's really handy to sort of keep the same progression that the plan's trying to give you, but also adjust the volume to suit your lifestyle or your schedule, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic tips. Couldn't have said it better, Rob. Rob, thanks so much for doing this. Hopefully this has shown somebody that whether you have family and professional responsibilities, how to fit your training in, tips on how to get more out of your structured training, tips on maybe not feeling too bad about actually doing something for yourself amongst all the other responsibilities that you have, tips on bikepacking, plenty of stuff. It's been a very dense issue or dense episode of this podcast. We've gotten a lot of information into it. So Rob, if people want to get in touch with you, is getting in touch via the forum post the best way or some other way?
Yeah, forum posts will be fine. I'm regularly on there most days. So yeah, I'll pick it up from there.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, Rob. And if you're listening to this, once again, if you're watching it on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Let us know if you have any questions down below, questions for Rob or anything else. Or if you appreciated this, just let us know down below with a comment. That's really helpful. Also, because that means other cyclists will be able to find this. And somebody's going to hear something that's just what they need to hear. So that's what we're going for. And then also, if you're listening to this on any podcast, share it with your friends, review it, head over to TrainerRoad.com, and we will talk to you all next time. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks.